Errant paradoxes are designed to adjust our thoughts yathabhutam to the actuality of existence, with which no ordinary rules of logic are compatible. To say, it is eternalism, to say that it is not is nihilism. And the object of Buddhist reasoning is to avoid both of these two antithetic views. Though not necessarily attempting to establish idealistic monism, but to lead us to the way of experiencing it in its inwardness as well as in its totality. O Lord of Ludhika, reads the sutra, he who sees thus sees rightly. If seen otherwise, it is carrying on discrimination, because here is discrimination which leads to dualism. It is like seeing one's own face in water. Or like seeing one's own shadow in the moonlight or by the lantern, or listening to an echo of one's own voice in the valley, wherein discrimination takes place leading to attachment. LN like manner. To separate dharma from adharma is only due to discrimination, and on account of this one finds it impossible to do away with the distinction, thereby creating all forms of falsehood. One is thus unable to realize tranquility. By tranquility is meant oneness of objects, and oneness of objects is the highest samadhi, from which grows an inner perception by supreme wisdom. The Tathagatgarbha is its objective. As we see here, any thought that permits of opposition or antithesis such as sat and asat, dharma and adharma, is considered to be the outcome of discrimination. And as long as this is cherished, one can never realize the standpoint of pure idealism, and the yathabhutam understanding of absolute oneness will never take place. LF This world is an error as is taught by thee. Is it to be regarded as existent or as non-existent? Mahamati is made to ask the Buddha in the Lankavatara. The natural conclusion as we ordinarily see it will be: this erroneous world does not exist. But the Buddha says, it exists as Maya, and no aspects of it are worthwhile clinging to. If there are any aspects of it worth clinging to, there can be no rejecting the notion of substance, and the theory of causation will be upheld as is done by the philosophers who assume the existence of a final cause. If this erroneous world is like Maya, does this not lead to the creation of another error? No, it does not, because Maya is not the cause of the error, because it does not produce faults and fallacies. Maya, indeed, does not produce faults and fallacies. O Mahamati, Maya is not the product of discrimination, but evolves from the magic formulas pronounced by another person. It owes not its existence to the power of self-discrimination and fallacious habit energy. It does not produce faults. Whatever faults there are in connection with this erroneous world come from the clinging of the ignorant to that which is nothing but the delusion of their own minds. The wise, however, are free from all this. What is meant by being unborn? When Maya is understood in the sense as elucidated above, we shall find light shed over the statement that all things are uncreated, or, literally, unborn. This is one of the phrases quite frequently met with in all Mahayana literature. And those who are not familiar with it will certainly find the phrase devoid of sense, as they may regard it as having no connection with self-realization. But this again is a part of viewing things yathabhutam. For if existence is not to be annotated by any one of the four propositions and is above the alternation of sat and asat, and not controlled by the law of causation, it cannot be described in any other way than by calling it unborn, not in the sense of eternity, nor in that of uncreatedness. Things are unborn simply because no categories admitting contradiction or alternation or antithesis are applicable here. Eternity contrasts with non-eternity or impermanence. Uncreatedness, if it has any relative meaning, stands in opposition to creation. And if being unborn is taken in a similar way, it limits itself, and our perception of things will be no more yathabhutam but affected by parikalpa. For this reason, the Buddha in the Lankavatara repeatedly warns us not to get confused here, but to understand anutpadarha sarvadharmanam in its absolute, unconditioned sense. Why is existence regarded as unborn or unoriginated? Because there is neither creating nor created, and, therefore, there is no causer, i.e., creator. Again, things are unborn because they are to be regarded as Maya, and because the Buddha desires that the philosophers should look beyond logic and its necessary limitations. As long as the antithesis of Sat and Asat is considered objectively real, as held by some philosophers, there will be the real coming into existence and the real passing away from it. Those who are taken to the passing away aspect of existence are nihilists, while those who look for the eternal aspect are eternalists. And neither of them has the right view of it. They are attached to one thing or another, they are far from attaining the point where all things are perceived in their true bearings, that is, as manifestations of mind itself. The LṳNG-GIA calls this viewpoint seeing into the abode where things are in their suchness. The Gatha reads, because there is no causing, there is no birth. Where existence is admitted, there is the holding of birth and death. When it is seen as being like Maya, etc., no discrimination takes place as regards appearances. This Buddhist idea of being unborn is liable to be confused with eternalism as is suggested by Mahamati. But when we know that anutpada, to be unborn, is not an idea contrasted to utpada, to be born, or an idea subject to the principle of causation, but an idea absolutely going beyond opposites, we come nearer to the truth. We need an inner perception to see into the true nature of existence. Otherwise, like the ignorant and confused, we see things where there is really nothing, and imagine them to be actualities though they are like the hare's horns or the tortoise's hair. Vikalpa takes place here, and all looks distorted. So we read in the sutra. According to my doctrine, there is neither being nor non-being, for existence is not to be characterized as being born, nor as disappearing. Why is there no non-being? For it is like seeing various objects created by the magician or in a dream. As long as there are things actually seen, they cannot be said to be non-existent. Why is there no being? For the self-nature of all things that appear to be here, is really non-existent, they are seen and yet not seen, they are taken hold of and yet not taken hold of. Therefore, I say that things are neither eforistant nor non-existent. If a man, realizing that there is nothing but what is seen of mind, abides in the suchness of things where no individuation takes place, he will see that all doings in the world cease. To discriminate is the business of the ignorant and not of the wise. O Mahamati, it is due to the mind that discriminates that there appears a world destitute of reality, such as the palace of the Gandharvas or the phantom creations of the magician. To distinguish between the born and the not born, between the created and the uncreated, is like talking about the works of the magician, that have never been in existence and therefore that will never disappear. The ignorant fail to see the self-nature of existence because their views are perverted. When they are thus perverted, they are unable to realize a state of aloofness, and as they are unable to do so, they cannot disengage themselves from false discrimination. As long as one sees things particularized in forms, there is a perception of the born and the unborn, and as a result discrimination goes on. Nirvana is where there is no birth, no extinction. It is seeing into a state of suchness absolutely transcending all categories constructed by mind. For it is the Tathagata's own inner consciousness. In connection with the Anutpada idea, it may not be out of place to say a few words about the Mahayana conception of what is known as Anutpadika dharmic shanti. One meets with this phrase quite frequently in Mahayana sutras, though not so much in the LṳNG-GIA. Literally rendered, it means not born object patience and in Chinese. This evidently baffled some of the European translators of Mahayana texts. But we shall be able to understand it much better now than they, as we have already explained what the Mahayanists mean by all things not being born. The idea is simply that reality or dharma or existence in general is beyond all predicable attributes, and therefore in the failure of language and intellect. Definition is impossible, and being outside the ken of all but direct perception, all we can state of it is emptiness or unbornness in the absolute sense. Anutpadika dharma is a statement concerning existence from the Mahayana point of view. In this connection, dharma does not mean laloi, nor a consequence, nor an idea. but the last term of the compound, Kshanti, may be somewhat puzzling. What has patience to do with this existence that is to be designated as unborn? Kshanti, of course, means patience here as when it is one of the 6 paramithas, or resignation, or acquiescence, but not in its ordinary sense. For Kshanti here does not mean to endure, or to suffer patiently. Endurance or suffering implies unwillingness and resistance to a certain extent. The sense of Buddhist Kshanti, however, is a willing compliance or acceptance. When the Anidpana view of existence is truthfully recognized and accepted, it becomes the principi of one's conduct, determining the whole attitude of mind. The Chinese scholars generally take patient for recognition as they are both pronounced Zhen. But, strictly speaking, the term is not an intellectual one, it belongs to the will, it is a wholehearted acceptance of the ultimate fact as perceived by a mind free from errors or wrong judgments. LN the Avatamsaka Sutra, a chapter is devoted to an explanation of 10 kinds of Kshanti. Kshanti in sounds means to listen to the oral teaching of the Buddha, to accept it without fear or hesitation and to abide in it wholeheartedly. Kshanti of obedience is to reflect upon the nature of things, and, truthfully penetrating into it, to keep the mind pure and serene. Kshanti in the unborn nature of existence has already been explained. The rest of the 10 are realized when one attains to the knowledge of things as like Maya, mirage, dream, echo, shadow, phenomenal, and empty. That this way of looking at existence is generally Mahayanistic and that it is not the same as regarding existence as altogether unsubstantial from the relative point of view, has been already made clear, as I hope, in the preceding section. Point 1. How is Nirvana explained? Nirvana has been the central object of the Buddhist life ever since the Buddha's own time, though in the Mahayana we do not come across the term so much as in the Hinayana. The idea has been replaced to a certain extent by such conceptions as prajna, sarabhati, dharmakaya, tathata, pratyatmajjhana, etc. As Buddhist thought drifted towards intellectual intuitionalism. The Lankavatara, however, has not forgotten to make reference to nirvana and to interpret it in its own characteristic manner. According to its author, whoever he may be, nirvana is realized when one can see into the abode of suchness. Here is the point: the intellect as such cannot enter. For it dissects and establishes somewhat to take hold of, and it will then see that something coming into existence and disappearing. But nirvana has no tangible form or another. The Kshanti of obedience is to see into the truth that there is no self-substance in any individualist object, animate or otherwise, and, therefore, that there is neither actor nor sufferer, and things are eternally such as they are. When a man comes to accept this truth, though he may not yet have fully realized its meaning, he has the obedience. He dharmic shanti, which is apparently an abbreviation for Oapatikaddharmic shanti, is attained when he fully realizes the truth and knows that all is empty, including emptiness itself. And it neither comes into existence nor ceases from working. To attain nirvana, therefore, is to see into the truth of things yathabhutam, that is, as unborn, as not affected by categories of intellectual construction. To attain nirvana, which is a state of emptiness inherent in the nature of things and which again is a state of self-realization obtained by means of supreme wisdom, there must be a revulsion at the deepest seat of consciousness known as the alayavijnana. The latter is a kind of mental receptacle where all the memory of one's past deeds and psychic activities is deposited and preserved in a form of energy called vasana. But as this energy is so contaminated with ignorance and wrong judgments and all sorts of attachment, it reacts upon an external world in a way detrimental to the realization of nirvana, and, therefore, to the perception of the truth yathabhutam. The old conditions must now be overhauled in order to create a new situation in our consciousness. To do this, we must free ourselves from views nihilistic and eternalistic, and also from the notions of being and non-being. When this revulsion is effected, nirvana is found to be devoid of all predicates. In it nothing is gained, nothing is cast aside, no extermination, no eternity, no unity, no diversity, one finds here. Nirvana is the mind of all holy ones and the goal of Buddhist discipline. The Hinayanists do not know this. When they realize that nirvana is something above particular conditions and tranquil in nature, they feel that they have it in its completeness in their nirvana, so called. But in fact they distinguish it from birth and death, and seek it for fear of being caught up in the net of transmigration. They cherish dualism, and so long as they do so, there is no true nirvana for them. Nirvana, according to the LṳNG-GIA, is not to be found in contradistinction to birth and death or samsara. For thus to distinguish one from the other is the result of a wrong judgment, which imagines a future when the world of the senses is altogether annihilated, which is their nirvana. The Mahayanistic nirvana goes, however, beyond the dualism of nirvana and samsara. It is to be found where there is the identity of nirvana and samsara. So long as dualism is adhered to, there is no nirvana, no self-realization. Light and shadow, long and short, black and white, they are mutually related. When they stand alone each by itself, they have no meaning. So with nirvana. When it is sought after in relation to samsara, we have a sort of nirvana. But this kind vanishes when separated from the condition of mutuality in which it exists. True nirvana is that which is realized in the oneness of nirvana and samsara, absolute or sunya in its nature, and above the relativity of eternalism and nihilism. Mahayana followers strive to realize this kind of nirvana. The following passages too from the LṳNG-GIA will give us some ideas of nirvana prevalent at the time when the sutra was compiled. The Buddha said, "O Mahamati, what is regarded as nirvana by the philosophers is not in accordance with the true features of nirvana. Listen, O Mahamati, I will tell you what it is. Some philosophers, seeing how impermanent things are, do not cling to the individual conditions. To them no externa world exists, nor does the subjective mind exist. They do not think of the past, present, and future. Like the light that shines no more, like the seed that has no life, like the fire that no more burns, all attachments are gone with them, no individualizing reflections take place, and this they consider to be nirvana. But inasmuch as they see something destroyed, their nirvana is not a true one. O Mahamati. Again, there are some who think that departing to another realm is nirvana. There is no externa world of particulars for them. It is like wind ceasing to blow. Again, some think that not to see the distinction between the knowing subject and the known object is nirvana. Again, there are some who, holding to the view that all individual appearances are real, cherish the feeling of pain. For they are ignorant of the truth that all is the manifestation of mind only. And just because of this ignorance they are frightened with appearances and seek for a state where there are no appearances. An intense longing for this is regarded by them to be nirvana. Again, there are some who, reviewing things inner as well as externa, in their individual and universal aspects and as existing in time, think that here is self-substance, not subject to destruction. And in this they find nirvana. Again, there are some who believe in the indestructibility of all things such as ego, being, life, growth, and personality, and think this to be nirvana. Again, some philosophers, not being intelligent enough, imagine the reality of prakriti and purusha and think that the gunpas in various transformations constitute all objects. And in this they see nirvana. Again, some philosophers see nirvana in the extinction of both merit and demerit, others in the extinction of evil passions by means of knowledge, and still others hold that Isvara is in truth the creator. Again, there are some who think beings come into existence mutually conditioning and not through any other cause. As they are without wisdom, they are unable to understand rightly, and because of their not understanding rightly, they imagine nirvana in their own way. Again, there are some who, wrongly imagining what they have seen to be the true path, find nirvana here. Again, some philosophers, holding to the view that quality and substance are one and yet two, and mutually related and yet not related, think Nirvana to be in this relationship. Again, there are some naturalists who believe in spontaneous creation. Saying of the peacock's variegated beauty, the thorn's pointedness, and the production of the various kinds of precious stones from the mine, who is the maker of all these things? Nobody but nature. And this is their nirvana. Again, some find nirvana in the understanding of the 25 principes. Again, some cherish the opinion that the looking after the welfare of the subjects by the observance of the 6 virtues is nirvana. Again, some think time is nirvana, from which issues the world. Again, there are some who see nirvana LN that the world exists, or that the world exists not, or that the world exists and exists not, or that the world and nirvana are not two different things. Again, there are some who, differing from all these philosophers, and in possession of all knowledge, proclaim like a roaring lion that to understand thoroughly what is meant by the manifestation of mind itself, Siddha Matra, not to get attached to the external world, to be disengaged from the 4 propositions, to abide in the Yahabhudam view of things, not to fall into the errors of dualism, to be free from the ideas of subject and object, to stand above all forms of knowledge, not to get attached to any one form of truth, to abide in the realization of the truth revealed to one's inmost consciousness, to perceive the twofold truth of egolessness, to be devoid of the 2 kinds of evil passions, to be cleansed of the 2 kinds of hindrance,